But so we'll come back. I'll come back and we'll get the program started. But please welcome Ballarong and Whadjuk Senior Nyunga Elder John McGuire, my older brother. I've got a couple of older brothers here today, and John's well known for a lot of his work and particularly a lot of the sport that he played when we were all much younger. But Johnny's really an icon for our family. He's a significant member of the Nyunga Nation and community, and today we welcome him to open proceedings and welcome us to Nyunga Buja or Whadjuk Nyunga Buja. So please welcome John McGuire.
Thanks very much, Oral. For a moment there, he made me sound much better than I really was. But it's great to be here, and thanks very much for the invitation to come along. Obviously, a protocol that we go through as First Nations people and here in Nyunga country is a welcome to country. It's a process that's been around for thousands of years. And as we moved through and across each other's territories, we welcomed each other. We made travel safe, and we looked after each other as we moved across country. I want to pay my respects to my community elders and our ancestors who survived and cared for this country. And of course, our old people, paved the way for us as Nyungas, as contemporary holders of knowledge and country here in this world that we live in today. Of course, they endured tough policies that impacted them enormously. But their toughness, their resilience, and their fight has paved the way for where we are today. And of course, Oral, and I look around and there's my nguni, Richard Wally, and Gordon Cole, Danny Ford, all these guys, apart from being related to me, have done enormous work across Nyunga country. And so we acknowledge the up and coming leaders of our country. Ganjurup, nunak nichi yak in ngala buja. Buja ngala moort, wang in yak in Kora. This is country that our old people walked on and talked on a long time ago. We were born into a circle of harmony and belonging. The Wargle and the rainbow spirit, and the Waich, the emu, are our creator beings. Creator beings in the world of Nyunga. The world, of course, was dictated by the prevailing winds, which meant the family or Moort moved through the landscape. They followed in the footsteps of their ancestral fathers, who had been taught and guided by the creators who had provided and stocked the country with wildlife, species of plants, galep, or our places of shelter, and water resources or water sources to maintain everything. Of course, we are in Whadjuk country, and this particular place was known as Muru. We enjoy 6 seasons, and of course, each season tells us what is available in terms of resources, foods, and the landscape, but also the temperatures. And we are in Bunuru at the minute. Cooler months, cooler winds, and foods and resources that we can use that are available now in this season. Ngalang kura karajinicha buja yai ngalojena kulin balapin jena kalin karajin ngalang buja kalyakur. Our old people have cared for this country since the beginning of time. Today, we follow in their footsteps. Deman mam nuna kurtwin nuna kalakmaya kunyanwa. Ngalabuja, Ngalawirn, Nitya Boy. This is my grandfather's and grandmother's country, where their spirits still move. The spirit of our land and the spirit of our old people are one. Gura Yei Milabuda. Gura Yei Milabuda Ngalabuja Boy. Jinangin Bo, Nyunga Wajala Danju Kulin. So as we move forward and as we walk together, Danju Kulin simply means walk together. And it's a wonderful saying that we have as Nyungas. And that's how we've always survived, walking together, looking after each other. Buruan, Nuna Kala Kulin, Ngala Moort Wien, Jinang Dabakan. When this is done and you travel home, may the good spirits of our old people watch over you and guide you safely. Thank you.
Rick Shaw is a Gamilaroi mathematician and actuary from northern New South Wales, a freshwater man. He has advised the IMF and World Bank on social security reform in the Middle East and several governments on complex valuation exercises and negotiation strategies. While based in New York, he led a team that determined the losses arising from the 9/11 attacks, and he advised many governments on the valuation of the US subprime portfolios that led to the global financial crisis of 2009 to 2011. He was on the Death Watch committee that led to the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody. His current focus is combining Aboriginal and Western ways of valuing complex systems. He's still hoping for a call up to the Wallabies. Rick will be presenting today on natural capital and Aboriginal systems thinking. Welcome, Rick.
I've just recent in my life had to start using reading glasses, so I'm not too sure how I'm going to go. Hopefully, I've got a big enough font here that I don't need them, so I can see you too. The Gabiyama rickshaw, no. I'm a river man. Now these days I spend a lot of time in around Brewarrina where the Brewarrina fish traps are in Yampa land, and there's a song line that goes from around there, from Brewarrina, through across to just south of Perth, and in the old days we used to walk the land there and back again, and there's movement. There's a couple of the elders are going through the process of reaching across to all the people who have this concept that they own that land, so that we can start opening up the line again. And I find that I just find that so exciting, because it is, as John was saying, it's an important part of our culture was walking the land like that. We were all one across this land, maintaining responsibility for our individual regions. And part of that. It was part of we had some great processes in our culture about turning boys into men. For a lot of kids, a lot of our young boys, is that 5-year or so walk there and back again is a process by which they were left as boys and came back as men. As a father of two teenage boys, I can really see the value in doing something like that. So if we do start walking again, I mean, part of the thing I'm talking about today is walking in two worlds. So we're not going to do it in the old way, you know. We'll do it with a bit of style, with a couple of youths behind us. But so that's part of what I'm here to do. So and just as part of that, so I feel like I'm at the end of a line that I want to come do. I want to do slowly, and I do feel welcomed to be here. Thank you. So I'm here today to talk about natural capital, and in particular the problems of measurement of natural capital. Now I prefer discussion to monologue, so just speak up anytime. I'm going to try and finish within my allotted time, and at the end, if there is no questions or discussion points, what I'm going to do, I'm going to come up with some questions, which is all on the spot to make sure you've been listening. So now. As I said, I'm a quant. I'm a technical person, but today I'm going to mention some aspects of the measurement scheme, some technical aspects today. But I more want to talk to the philosophy that underlies these measurement systems, because any actions you do in the world are sort of based on sort of your beliefs in the world. There's no separation in our culture between theory and practice. So I think it's really important. I think the different worldviews are an important part of our discussion today. And so I'll talk a bit about that. As I say, the theme here is talking about, it's not one or the other, it's one and the other. The Uluru Statement talks about our children walking in two worlds. And I feel I embody that concept of walking in two worlds, and hopefully my talk today has that spirit. I'm talking about a valuation approach to natural capital, and I've developed. It's based on modern mathematical theory, complexity theory, which is a modern mathematical approach to modelling non-linear systems, and it's what I and many other people the approach we used to value the financial instruments when I was based in New York, in Bermuda. And it happens that the underlying concepts are a really good expression of elements of my culture, and I want to talk to that today, in that spirit of bringing the two worlds together. Because in this country, in this land, we talk too often of difference, and there's much more that unites us than divides us. Because traditional Indigenous rights, what do I do? Oh, not yet, mate. I'm going slow. Okay. The traditional Indigenous rights and wealth extraction are I've got it written down in here when I change slides, mate. The traditional Indigenous rights and wealth extraction are often seen as in opposition. But our collective challenge is to move beyond that really simple binary view and develop ways of combining the powerful processes that drive Western capitalism with the wisdom that's maintained the land for millennia. Because it's a shared underlying goal we all have, is to inform and make decisions that are aimed at sustainable prosperity. Because economic modelling is a basis for how governments and corporations, people with power, make decisions. I have a number of slides. As I say, I'm a pointy head. I'm a quant. I'm a technical person. I'm not going to talk too much to the technical sides today. So because I want to talk more about set up for the talking forward and the rest of the discussion. That is the main point of today. So the textbook definition of natural capital, it refers to the world's natural assets, land, sea, air, water, plants, animals, and so on. And so natural capital, nature, it's a kind of akin to the concept of human capital, which is how economists think of us, or social capital, how they think of the aspects of society or cultural capital. Now, here is, even in the term, is the stuff of conceptual difference, because defining all these things that matter to us as capital, that grates with me. I've worked in the centres of capitalism, New York, London, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and I can see the attraction of monetising everything. It simplifies things down, and it makes making decisions easier. Because in theory, when something becomes measurable, a trading market can be set up, and the market will decide what we value. But this approach reduces the things we value as humans to that which we can quantify. And that can have unfortunate, inadvertent consequences. What has happened is that we've created a lot of wealth by considering only those things we can measure, the cash flows, and at the same time degraded our land, which degrades our society, and in the end degrades who we are as humans. So the purpose of natural capital accounting is to allow consideration of non-financial items, basically what matters to us as humans, what the economists will call externalities. Now, trying to measure non-financial items is challenging. It's frankly quite easy to measure cash flows. It's more difficult to measure biodiversity, what a river means to us, a love of our kids, a love of each other, a love of ourselves. But it's not, there are processes out there to value these there's very well-developed processes to develop these, to value these non-economic items. You look at a company like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, their balance sheet has not just the sum of their expected cash flows. They have a brand value for Coca-Cola, there's a brand value for Pepsi, of billions of dollars that's on their balance sheet. I mean, that's not a financial item. There's a lot of Silicon Valley companies that are valued at tens of billions of dollars that have never made a profit. I mean, there are methods out there to value non-financial items. What's missing is it is being put forward as a technical challenge, but it's actually it's a challenge of will, of desire. What do we value what we want to consider? I got this. Saw this in the New York Review yesterday. Now here I do need my glasses. There's an article from Elizabeth Berman, a sociologist. Economic power is difficult to perceive because it has become the very language of governance. There is a widespread ubiquity of an economic style of reasoning. This way of thinking assumes that social ills such as failing health systems and environmental hazards can be avoided by increasing competition. This rhetoric of market efficiency insulates economic policies from political debate. There's a passing over to assumed objective experts to supply neutral technocratic answers to our complex challenges. Now, the standard measurement and valuation approach used now in a Western society is cost-benefit analysis, which is geared at only considering the cash flows. And I do a lot of work on government policy, and because often they ask for a cost-benefit analysis to make a decision how the cash flow is going to go. Now, as an example, and it is a very powerful and very useful tool. If your intent is to only value the cash flows, and I'll give a coal mine as an example. Say you want to dig a coal mine, and all you care about is the money you're going to make. So you want to know how much it's going to cost to set the thing up and to dig the stuff out, what your revenues is going to be, if that's all you care about, you should, cost benefit analysis is the way to go. But if you care about the land and the other thing and the impact you're going to have and the cost of repairing the land after that, and the impact you're going to have on the greater environment with the stuff you're going to pump out into the air, cost benefit analysis comes up short. And when we create markets, that whole idea of market efficiency is if this market is this in what Adam Smith called this invisible hand works, we can have inadvertent consequences. I've done a lot of work advising corporates in trying to get around setting up carbon offset schemes. The intention, so what happens is, a large corporation can be doing, polluting stuff, and they can ameliorate that by carbon offsets. They're going to buy land and grow pine trees, often rows of pine trees, or whatever. There's other options, or there is a tradable market where they can go and buy offsets. Now, the whole concept really does my head in, because the idea that in my personal life I could, like, from Monday to Friday, go and do any bad shit that I want, but on the weekend, if I go to church, it's okay. It's the same concept to me, and and what's coming, as anyone who knew the land knew, that the concept of the way they were doing it was not leading to outcomes that looked after the land. There's been a lot of reports recently saying that a lot of the carbon offset stuff that have been put in place, where people have made a lot of money, have actually degraded the land. We know that. Monoculture, but the way they're doing it is monoculture. We know pine trees often, they're acidic, I think it is, and they're not good for the land that they're put on. So if the philosophy is the tool you use to make decisions matters. So what's happened, though, is that the fact of climate change is made it clear that we need to care for the environment. There's an increasing understanding that the Earth is not infinite, and there's an understanding that we need to consider in our decision-making framework those things that we matter, and that's where the concept of natural capital accounting comes from. So whilst there's a general agreement around the idea of natural capital accounting, the mainstream people, the people with power and money, they're stuck a little bit in application because it runs against what they've been taught. As I say, cost benefit analysis, it's the appropriate, just considering the cash, is the appropriate approach to take if all you're interested in is the extraction of wealth, and your intention is you see the land as just something to extract value from, and you don't intend to stay in that land to suffer the consequences of your degradation of the land. In that sense, it really is a tool that reflects a colonial mindset. And the sole focus is on what I would call short-term wealth. And the aspects, the principles underlying natural capital accounting are second nature to many other people around the world, second nature to us to care for the land. So we realists, we accept all the toys that have come here in the last couple of 100 years. We're not looking to go back to the old ways. We walk in two worlds. And part of what we're trying to do is hope that powerful people who are humble enough to also listen to us, and that together we can make the whole of Australia greater than the sum of its two parts. So as I say, there's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of talk going around about defining what natural capital is. I mean, there's a heap of this shit out there, man. And you can spend a lot of time reading it and understanding it. But it's time's going to talked a bit to the accounting frameworks after me. It's important stuff, don't get me wrong, but the issue is not the technical side. The issue is what we have is a problem of philosophy here. But I want to talk about, I don't want to get too technical on you because that's my comfort zone, but I just want to talk to you about the belief systems that underlie an approach, complexity theory, an approach to valuing the whole system. Because as I say, the current approach to valuations project cash flows for the underlying components of a system, and then to apply a discount rate to allow for the time value of money. And this approach has a lot of underlying assumptions that don't tend to get questioned. It assumes that a system can be broken down into its component parts, individually analysed, and then put back together again to come up at an aggregate value. Very importantly, the relationships between the different components are generally not modelled, or they are treated as linear using a multiplier approach. So the Western approach, this approach, it's an Enlightenment approach, assumes there is an objective reality out there which can be objectively valued. And actually, values don't have absolute meaning. They have relative meaning. That's very important. And the value add, there are ways around to deal with that very essential fact. A number in itself means nothing. Over time, or in comparison to other things, it means something. But the standard economic approach, it's straightforward. It's very rational. It's clear to explain. But the big gaps in what we're valuing can lead to drastic consequences, which I possibly this afternoon I'll talk a bit. I'll give a few examples of. Because what I see, because I've worked in large governments, corporations a bit, what I see is that people, we reduce our focus to those things that we could measure. Anyone here who's worked in a large corporation has had to do the process of going through the KPIs by which we judge performance of our people. I mean, it's inhumane to reduce people to a set of numbers, but that's what we do because immeasurable stuff is easy. The interesting thing, one of the interesting things for me is that the Western, this idea that the world can be fully understood rationally and there's an objective reality out there which can be measured. The West, the belief systems have moved beyond that when they moved from Newtonian mechanics to sort of Einstein and the quantum mechanics and relativity, which incorporates a lot of the aspects of our belief systems and also some of the Eastern belief systems. So but the fact is that Western practice has not caught up with the finding of Western philosophy in their physics over the last 150 years or so. So the indigenous perspective is that a system can only really be considered in its entirety. And our approach sees that any system, the world, everything is an indivisible whole, and it recognizes the real value of a system is in the relationships between the different components. It works at many levels. One of the other aspects here is that our Aboriginal metaphysics is fractal in that we believe every part of a system reflects every other part of the system, and every part of the system contains the whole system. Confucius had a similar concept when he described, we're setting out a moral code. He says, your behavior to yourself to your family, to your community, and to the country as a whole. Those concentric circles of influence all influenced each other. Your behaviour in any of them reflected your behaviour in all of them, and that's how we think. So as I sit here today, it's not I am of what is I or Tom. It's not the value, the whole, the interactions between us. That's where the value is. That's where the beauty and the value is in our lives and who we are. And the standard Western approach doesn't consider that. I was just thinking about the example of the family. You know, you look at it. My Rebecca and our 3 kids. It's the whole family is it's a whole thing. We're all individuals. It's a whole thing, and we need to reflect that type. That's our values. That's what it means to be human, and we're ignoring that in our decision-making tools. It's an important part of our belief system also that we accept that the world is essentially unknowable. So we're very humble about the actions we make in the world. We've been here a long time, tens of thousands of years, and longer, and so we've got evidence-based practices, but we're very humble about the interactions of things because we have an instinctive decisions. We make instinctive decisions about them. We don't ever think we rationally understand them. So what's boiled down Aboriginal belief systems for me is all the stories and everything we have. The most important story is get in touch with your gut. Your mind will lead you astray. You can't trust your heart. What we're taught is to trust your gut. Now, this stuff sounds like theory, but it's practical. The thing that amazes me most about my culture is that we've brought the findings of quantum mechanics and relativity into our daily lives. Our thinking is not separate from our practice. And we've developed governance systems that reflect these beliefs, and those governance systems clearly work. The land is sacred to us, and our aim is to pass on a better world to our children. A good comment or a bad comment? Okay. So I mean, we know how to live in harmony with the land. We live in this world. We're not going back to the old ways. We want to get on in the modern world, and we want to do it with people. So in summary, for natural capital accounting, the approach to apply is Western economic and actuarial modelling approaches, which are consistent with Indigenous principles. And this diagram sort of describes it. It's what the standard approach is to cost-benefit analysis. It's to separately have cash flows related to every separate item. The blue, which is meant to be the green dots. So one of them might be, this is a job I did about the marine estate of New South Wales. So we modelled the fishing industry and the tourism industry and the agriculture industry, which is represented by the green dots. And we just, projected forward the cash flows and added them up, and that's the value of the system. What that leaves out is the relationships and the impact of all those systems. Like whatever you're doing in agriculture, the runoff into the waters will impact the fish stock, and it also ignores the non-financial items, which is the blue dots, the trees, airs, tourism. So what I've got is a technical model, what I call a Bayesian inference system, which is not mentioned here. It's on the earlier slide. Which there are technical approaches to allow for those relationships and the non-financial items. This is all standard practice. But for people, I rarely get to talk to an audience of mathematicians. So you don't have to. It's really that's the problem of this valuation approach is a problem for technicians. You know, it's the same way we get, you know, engineers to build bridges. People like me do the valuation of this stuff. As I say, the issue is not the technical problem. The issue is that we are not yet at that stage where we're really acting in accordance with the principle, with the words a lot of people are saying around the consideration of natural capitals. Is that me? Oh, can I go on? That is me. Hey, boss, I need the next slide. There we go. I want to start now, that's the background. I want to start now talking about the purpose of today. This slide talks to the bush turkey story, which in some variant is told across the land. Some mobs use the goanna rather than the bush turkey. Some coastal mobs, East Coast mobs use whales. It's one of the stories we share with our borai, our kids, because it teaches them that they're all beautiful. They each have a role, that we survive by working together. So the story is the bush turkey. And the bush turkey, it needs a heart to get going. It needs a head to think and see what's going on in the world. It needs a gut to eat the food. And it needs a bum to get rid of the rubbish. So we tell our kids this story and we say to them, what do you want to be? You want to be the head? You want to be the heart? And so on. And the kids go and they say, oh, you're the head, or oh, I want to be the gut. You know, I love food. None of them ever want to be the bum, you know. And so we look. To develop a unique investment opportunities that will enrich our lives, and these opportunities are related to the 65% of the Australian landmass that is owned by Aboriginal people. I fear that there's a lot of, as I say, I've done a hell of a lot of talking around natural capital. I've sit on these government committees and I speak to a lot of academics and stuff. And I fear that sometimes this feeling of virtue you can get from talking about natural capital is the outcome of all this talk. Because what I'm not seeing enough of is active investment management, considering the elements of natural capital. And that's why you've all been invited here. As I say, I think it is mainly a conceptual block. And I'm going to, it's certainly not a problem of valuation. It's guys like me, and I'm just one of many, can do that stuff. We've got to want to do it. But it's also hard to go against hundreds of years, a couple of hundred years of cultural mind mind printing on people's minds about the only thing that matters is material wealth. So how can we come together? How can we all come together to create investment opportunities which give required returns and cares for the land? And I will say the time is now. There's been a shift in approach by First Nations people since the voice referendum went down. As the way we had, we kind of had a doona year, and but the way we see what we realise, our interpretation is we've not been rejected as people by Australian populace. What Australia has said to us is, don't go via Canberra. And we've listened. And today is part of us setting a path to achieve self-determination and economic independence. I go, it's just me. I'm not really that fast. I've forgotten what the next slide is anyway, so forget about it. I like this quote just because it's William Blake, the old English poet. He's talking about the fractal nature of the world. And that's how we think about the world, like that. What's in our families works for the whole environment, works for everything. Awalia, as a Picton-Warlow say. I put this up because we're not that different, you know. We all think the same things. We think, you know, to be really frank, I personally think that the West, with all its expansion and colonialism, kind of lost its values a little bit. And the path, natural capital and stuff like that, is a path of rediscovering those values. So where we are as can we go to the next slide? Is that all right? Is that me? Do I do that? Where we are as a people is we're nation building. And we recognise that a lot of people have achieved great financial success in Australia over what to us is recent times. And we do seek the support, we do seek a oneness here, we do seek the support of people who have done well. And because I really want to make the point, we're looking for investment to help Aboriginal people, but it's also to help everyone. I mean, because what's really important is this is not charity. We want to meet anybody's investment requirements, or standard investment requirements, which I'll talk about, and then we want to exceed them through the practice of our culture. Because this really, what we're seeking is prosperity with purpose. Because as I say, we have unique opportunities only available through working with Aboriginal people, usually on Aboriginal land, but we're not looking for any favours. So I'm going to make some suggestions now. This is a man I very much respect, a West Australian man, who talks about the way our belief systems and the way we think and the way we act. Systems thinking, or complexity theory, as we can call it in the West. And we have this culture, and we've been, over the last couple of 100 years, we've been sort of a little bit in shock. We are looking to share that culture a bit more. We've learnt a lot about the culture that's come here, the cultures that have come here, and there hasn't been that much interest in our cultures, and it's hard to find. We've not been good at sharing it, but we are wanting to do more of that. We do want to give the gift of our culture, which is the culture of this land. We do want to share that. But here are some provocative statements, just to really set the agenda, because I'm sick of pussyfooting around. What is true is that we Aboriginal people, to make this work, to make things like we want to talk about today work, we Aboriginal people need to get our act together and become easier to negotiate with. We have to make clear who is responsible to speak. And we're doing that. That's one of the roles I've been asked by my elders to do as someone who is trained in business. And I've got a colleague here, Steve Stanton, who's an investment, who's putting together deals. His job is to bring together money to help black businesses. And I've worked with people all around the world. Steve's just world class. And that's the type of thing that we are doing now. This is what we do. We're not going by Canberra. We're setting up this stuff ourselves. But we need to become easier to deal with. We recognise that. And non-Aboriginal people need to move beyond a charity mindset. We have a very sophisticated culture that knows how to live and prosper in the land. We walk in your world. And we're asking you to come and walk in ours. Not terra nullius anymore, obviously. And I'll say, if anyone who is interested in making investments on land, involve the local people, the local Aboriginal people who consider themselves custodians of the land, though it may not be expressed in very humble ways. That involvement, I've got examples I might use this afternoon, will almost certainly increase the value of your land, the value of your investment through the knowledge of the land. Natural capital accounting is a door opener. It encourages Western mindsets to consider how we value things. This is an opportunity. Let's grasp it. I want to talk about the broader, am I getting close to finished? I just want to talk about the broader perspective as I finish up here. Over the last 25 years across the world and in Australia, there's been a lot of work done formalising adequate governance and reporting standards for financial institutions. I've been involved with a lot of this work, both here and overseas, and it's made the financial industry a lot stronger. Global standards being developed, which countries like Australia have been consistent. What I see now very rapidly happening is the beginning of dismantling some of these large bureaucracies, which have become cumbersome. Similarly, a little bit behind that, the large corporations that kind of have a lot of power in the world are in themselves becoming diverted by internal power struggles and a culture of unaligned values. Large organisations tend to become cults, and individuals with them can focus on climbing the corporate ladder and lose that greater sense of purpose, which should be passing on a better world to our children. These are worldwide trends. Colonialism led to capitalism, led to corporatism. And that stuff is starting to be challenged now. And this is a great opportunity, because what this means for this group and the stuff we're talking about today is the concept of international policy development and standards it's kind of falling over, it's stagnating. So in some ways, it points to the future, which is the way we used to be constructed, not just here, certainly here, but everywhere, of being a lot more regional in our governance structures. So I will say there's a tendency. I don't think we should, for the people who want to get the rules about how we should do things like natural capital accounting. I think there's enough out there already. I think it's time has passed with the world sort of fracturing the way it is to wait for international promulgation of these standards. There's enough info and guidance there now. So let's be brave and let's lead. I just want to, I talked before about the problem of measurement, how measurement is not absolute, it's only relative. One of the good standards that I really like is Accounting for Nature's Econ. Accounting for Nature is it a charity? It's a profit maker, isn't it?
comes out of it.
Yeah, it's set up by Ken Henry, man. He's the old Treasury secretary. He's a good bloke. He spent a lot of his youth crawling through wombat holes because he was fascinated by wombats, you know. So and he's not a bad bloke. And what they've, and the Wentworth Group of Concerned Scientists. Yeah. And Tom's going to talk a bit more about the econ next. But what the econ does, it says, it gives a really simple measurement approach. So let's assume the world was pristine pre-colonisation. So let's give it an econ of 100. And then let's compare where the world is, where any ecosystem is now to how it was back then. So very degraded land would be about 40 or 50, say, on an econ, and more less degraded land might be, 80 or 90 or something. And our policy should be focused on increasing our econ. So very simple, quite elegant concept, which Tom will talk about a bit more. But so that's it is a measure out there that is being more and more used, and I really encourage using it. A few years ago, when I was a bit more idealistic, I was hoping it was going to become a national and international standard. But as I say, let's not wait for somebody to tell us what to do. I also want to talk a bit about what we're doing as within Aboriginal sort of people, those of us with sort of experience in the larger financial world, where black finance companies are being set up to guide appropriate investments and to represent Aboriginal interests. These are being done, will be run by Aboriginal people who walk into the two worlds. We recognise we don't come from a long history of family and wealth often, and we are looking for support in this area. And that's so what Steve and I are doing is putting together, and others are doing separately from us, as black investment companies. Where we're looking to set up a black Macquarie bank, basically. And I've been approached by other people who want to set up a black superannuation funds. I'm actively working to set up an insurers focused on providing culturally appropriate products to our people. We're talking to banks about the way products that culturally appropriate products for them. I just want to make clear that when I talk about black finance companies, it's a product and a processes that are culturally appropriate. There's no intention to be exclusive. The doors will be open for anyone, and in particular, I've worked a lot in the Middle East, and there's a lot of over there they have the Sharia finance, the Islamic financial principles. A lot of them, there's an understanding of community, and I see it as a way of allowing for our beliefs. It's a philosophy for financial products that I think has relevance to the stuff that we want to develop here. So our doors will be open. And we also recognise, as part of what we're doing, is that there's enormous growth in Aboriginal businesses. Supply chain providers to BHP and Rio and lots of other areas. And a lot of these businesses, they don't naturally have the administration and governance system that will allow investments. So one of the things we're doing is providing that back office support and governance structures to make investment into those companies easier. So now I just want to finish off by talking. There's some people here, I think, from superannuation funds who are interested in investment, natural capital and investment into Aboriginal led opportunities. And while I'm really interested in hearing from you people how we can work together to meet your requirements. I know that you are required to act in the members' financial interests, and that in addition to the normal investment criteria of return expectations, risk profile, liquidity profile, governance structures, etc. You also have APRA's comparative performance test hoops to jump to. So I think it's an important discussion because my observation from the East Coast was that it was Hester's public comments that forced action from Rio after Juukan Gorge. And so I think there's a lot of power and wealth there, and we're interested in how we can come together and play up and be our part that we choose in the bush turkey. So I've got a couple of examples here of how working together works and how Aboriginal knowledge can increase investment returns. But I'm going to leave those today. And I'll just finish off by saying, I see today this meeting and the next one we have and the next one we have is an important part of a broader agenda which is going to enable our cultural expression. Because we are emerging from the shock of the last 230 years. And our culture is reviving, old ceremonies are being resurrected and revitalised. But full expression of our culture, the original people of this land, is a necessary part of making everyone who lives in Australia whole and of looking after the land. So let's start talking, work out how to make our own story. Thank you. So let's start talking, work out how to make our own story. Thank you.
Okay. Imagine country with plentiful water in the soil and landscape, additional diversified income, people on country, reduce risk, revitalise country. This is what we want to achieve using Aboriginal cultural natural capital production landscapes. As you've heard from Rick Shaw's presentation, natural capital concepts relate strongly to an Aboriginal thinking approach. Everything is connected. Knowledge is connected to people, and living culture and listening to an evolving Indigenous people is key. What I'm presenting today is the result of a year-long research project conducted with input from 45 investors across a wide range of different investor groups, including asset management, retail banks, investment banks, insurers, superannuation, Aboriginal investors and venture capital. This has given us insight into what investors think of natural capital production landscapes. This project is an ongoing exploration of opportunities and challenges, and our findings are not yet final. Our goal today is to share insights and inspire you with what we have discovered so far. One key finding from the surveys is that Aboriginal people are held in high regard by investors when it comes to natural capital. So we want to hear your reactions and feedback on what is presented today. So what is natural capital? It's the plants, animals, air, water, energy, soils and minerals that provide benefits to people and are used by industries, households and governments. In our project, natural capital production landscapes is a concept where we consider that on a large scale, a regional scale, Balladong country. It's big. It integrates primary production and sustainable management of nature. And within that concept, we consider then natural asset companies, companies that are based on natural capital and use natural capital accounting to define and describe their achievements. And as Rick has suggested, I'll give you some background on some of the frameworks, as fun as they are, but they're the standards. So the natural capital accounting is basically it accounts for your natural assets. It uses ecosystem services to measure them and how they behave. and it aligns to the UN System of Environmental Economic Accounting, or SEA. SEA is used by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, so it's very important as far as a framework is concerned. But the other one that's important is the what's called the Common International Classification of Ecosystem Services. So this is the CICES. And those, this framework splits ecosystem services into three main parts, which you can see. Provisioning services, which are your food, your solar and your water, and then regulating services, which is things like air quality and pollination, and then cultural services, which is spiritual and recreational benefits that you derive from nature. And it's often seen that the headline economic value of ecosystem services is huge, of course. It's nature, it's everything. So we have often valuations of things like 190 trillion per annum, which is 2 times the world's GDP. And it's been said, and has been said recently, that more than half of global GDP is exposed to material risk, nature risk, which I've always found a bit surprising. And I'm more comfortable with the more recent one that was at the end of last year from the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which has 1.8 trillion US dollars under its assets. It said that it's 96% of their entire portfolio is going to be under natural capital risk assessment, which I think is truer to where it sits. The provisioning ecosystem services, if we focus on that, can be split between biotic and abiotic. Provisioning services are the products obtained from ecosystems. So abiotic are the freshwater resources, the minerals and metals, and the solar energy. The biotic is things like the crops, the livestock, the fish, and the biomass. When you have a look at the abiotic and the biotic, there's some important things. The biotic is the living things within an ecosystem, such as the plants, animals, and bacteria. And once again, the abiotic is the non-living components, such as water, soil, sunlight, and minerals. Last year, there was 2.1 trillion invested in clean energy globally and 730 billion in the global water market. That's abiotic. Biotic attracted just 120 billion, which is far less than the abiotic investment. Biotic is often seen as hard to measure and hard to value, whereas abiotic is more predictable, easier to measure and value, and therefore seen as less risky. So this is a problem, and I think that it's a fundamental, insight into the way that investment considers nature. And if you split it between the abiotic and the biotic, you can often see some patterns of behaviour about how markets behave and what they're considering value and what they are prepared to invest in. There are some frameworks and, as Rick mentioned, methodologies like the accounting for nature that can be used to measure biotic to try and address this issue. And so the environmental condition, or ECON, is a number which is defined by comparison to an optimal ideal state reference of 100. So it's essentially 100 is what good looks like. There's also the CSIRO state and transition modelling. These approaches are all relatable to investors. Excuse me. Important to know that Aboriginal systems thinking and understanding of nature effectively makes the biotic more predictable and less risky. So investors are aware of this when considering natural capital. In our project, we've got everything together. All the ecosystem services are brought together as a system. So this is what we've considered and defined for the investors to consider and comment upon. So we asked the investors, what are the barriers and opportunities with this concept? And by far and away, the biggest barrier or blocker that we've found is a lack of tangibility. What they said to us is it's all words. Natural capital is just all words. There's not enough tangible structure or tangibility and proof of some profitability around this for them to feel comfortable to invest in. which is key. So we need to make natural capital production landscapes that are tangible with cash flow and stable returns. This is what the investors are saying. We need pilot projects to do this. What are the opportunities? So with the opportunities, investors see natural capital land production landscapes as having strong environmental and cultural focus potential. So they see that, they want to see that, and they see that as important. There's also an interest in long-term growth potential, extending on what water and energy infrastructure projects have provided to them in the past. So in many ways, it's an extension, or it can be seen as an extension upon what they're already doing if you incorporate the abiotic. And as I've mentioned before, this investor survey has found some very important insights into the way that investors think about Indigenous Aboriginal as an important perspective in natural capital valuation. So I'll read you some of the investor comments because I think they're very important. Aboriginal people have been proven to be the first scientists, astronomers, engineers and environmentalists who have cared for country since millennia using scientific and environmental practices that need to be factored into a rapidly ever-changing world. Indigenous aligned natural capital opportunities are likely to have a higher valuation. First Nations people have deep and unique perspectives and knowledge regarding country and have a value system that links country and culture and value of the natural world. These perspectives and value systems will be critical in informing a path forward for valuing and investing in natural capital. Most of the world's biodiversity is on Indigenous lands. These people also have incredible stewards, or are also incredible stewards of the land, as they are spiritually connected, which the rest of us could learn from. And finally, they, being Aboriginal people, have experience with what good looks like, which I thought was a nice way to put it. So you can see that the importance to the investors, and I think this is truly the importance for a natural capital valuation, is to include the Indigenous cultural. You have to get the proper valuation. And so this is what the investors are telling us. Now, if we take an example of the systems approach, which I can quickly take you through, you've got the cultural, environmental and economic outcomes as defined by the ecosystem services. As Oral and Dr. Richard Wally, I'm not sure if he's talking today, but he will be covering cultural in more detail. But basically, culture enables healing country. Through culture, country is stronger and more productive. And cultural is central to everything that drives long-term goals and objectives. So it's the key. It's the starting point to everything. And I think that works very well. You can also see that within this cultural framework, we can focus on a number of streams. So if we consider our project using provisioning services, and we start with abiotic, and use it as a building block for the biotic, you can see that there's a structure that is going to be attractive to investors. So with renewable energy, one of the considerations is to use it yourself. See if you can put it to some use rather than trying to sell it to someone else. What can you do with lots of cheap energy? So you could power towns and industry, such as First Nations Clean Energy Network, the town of Hay, Yakandanda, Dandaragan. It's really a great, wonderful opportunity to do that, to have energy independence. You can fix nitrogen, and there's the technology Plasma Leap, which actually literally takes nitrogen out of the air that we breathe and creates fertiliser on country for you using renewable energy. You can also then process that further into liquid ammonia and other products. You can then, and Richard George will be talking about this presently, desalination using reverse osmosis with solar power can be used to restore your water and desalinate. You can use native seed and seedling production with the fertiliser and with the water and with the land. And Neil Canby will be talking about that in his presentation shortly. So there's also then producing water, so hydro harvester. We'll have a video on that at lunchtime. That's literally taking water out of air, which is amazing technology, 1,000 litres a day, looking to take that up to 10,000 litres a day. And then other things. So you can use it in all sorts of ways. So the key learning is use it yourself before you give it to anyone else, because then you can build your own value. I won't dwell any further because I'm probably out of time, but basically then you have another stream which you can develop and expand on. You can reclaim country, you can put in your native trees. Once you've got those fundamental building blocks, you can then enable biodiversity to be created and evolved, and return flora and fauna, rehydrate the landscape, build resilience, and protect and improve your production. So then there's finally obviously the community benefits, because everyone's going to be pretty busy doing this. So you've got employment, you've got skills diversification, you've got training education, you've got community ownership, most importantly, you've got equity, you've got then long-term projects, you've got people and country. Thank you very much.
Just highlights, I think the conversation so far has highlighted the fact that, you know, what Rick introduced us to was this two-world thinking, that the technical aspects of the sciences and the technology and the advancements in all of these areas that requires, or that is starting to, you know, evolve and shape what natural capital accounting particularly, but also the practice of protecting nature starts to manifest or evolve in ways where we've got to, as a collective, as human beings, we've got to start to understand these knowledges and these knowledge systems, all of them. Not just the first world, not just the white fella, not just the scientific, not just the industrial or the commercial. We have to take elements of all of our knowledges to start to do the most important responsibility, or as Rick said, purpose, and that is to care for country. Again, because we have lost that responsibility, or we've turned away from the responsibility and we've lost the practice. So with that, I want to introduce another old brother of mine who's another old silver fox. His name is Dr. Richard Walley. He is a preeminent expert on Nyungar culture and Nyungar knowledge. Our sacred knowledge, our Bulyada, our Karijan, our Karmin, our Kundam, our Buranga system. These are all critical parts of the Nyungar knowledge system, which is one of the many first world, first law knowledge systems. So I want to introduce my brother, Barley, as he is known in his Nyungar thing. He's a Bilyada. So he is a law holder for the river systems, the water systems. And we will be hearing from the other Richard, who's also a water expert, Richard George, later on. But I want to introduce this man because he's an icon in the Aboriginal affairs movement. He is known not only across Australia, or certainly not just here in Nyungar country, but he is well recognised around the whole world. He's been involved in many global projects and initiatives, from creating perfume out of sandalwood and bulgur, the grass tree, to leading and initiating, the Welcome to Country practice right here in Nyungar country. He has danced cultural dances around the world. He's an expert Yadaki didgeridoo player. He is a Nyungar knowledge holder. He is a language expert. He speaks with philosophies and understanding. I think someone, one of our whitefellow colleagues, referred to him as our version of the Dalai Lama, the Nyungar version of the Dalai Lama. So please welcome Dr. Richard Walley, a wonderful man, a beautiful spirit, who I'm sure will inspire you with his wonderful knowledge. Please welcome him.
Thanks, Ngun. John, thanks for opening up the portal for the old people and creating that safe passage for us. And inviting us to sit with them in this space. We don't invite them, they invite us. They're already here and they hold the connects. So this is a fantastic diagram that Oral has put up and designed. I'm going to speak with just up the background, but I'm going to do it the old way, where our knowledge system was put in a series of codes, and those codes had what we call trigger points, and that system with the trigger points was a fail system of when you come to put it down to diagrams. Why I say the fail system is that the white people could not comprehend the systems. So when we spoke about our marriage systems and how it broken down into those processes, it took 6 generations to come back to marry into your system. So that's just one. So I can be very cryptic and be philosophical, but I'd rather tell stories and get some outcomes. So I think the 3 elements that we always talk about when we talk about projects, we talk about place, purpose, and people. What is the impact on the place? What's the purpose? And then what's the people and the people involved with it? For every action, there's an outcome and there's a reaction. And our people realise that for a long, long time. So I'm going to just go back into our knowledge system and say how this system here works. It's actually, it's a brilliant process. This is a whole library of knowledge that we can speak for, taken one section at a time, from the seasons to the land, to the processes of our life cycles, and each of those can be segments that can take 2 or 3 days to talk about alone. So just that one drawing is an encyclopedia. And it's fantastic because it's entwined. The circles entwined with each other. They're not linear. The statement that was put up at one stage about a wonderful Native American saying about the white fella bringing the prisons and the hospitals. We had the same saying here. We had the same here saying when I'd call them the unsettlers. They weren't settlers because they unsettled everything. And the newcomers, regardless of who you are or what you are, the last comers are the most destructive. And that is people, plant, animal. The last comers take a while to adjust to that balance that's been there for a long, long time. And by the time they adjust, they realise what damage they've done and they try to rectify the damage. So the 3 sectors that I believe that's created the chaos that we're in today is the political system, the economical system, and the scientific system. So they try to analyse how we functioned. They turn it into an opportunity, then they create all these problems. So you have a look at it, don't care whether it's the ploughing of the land, the utilisation of animals, the taking of the trees. There were systems, economical, scientific, political systems. And when you get into a whole lot of mess, where we are today with the challenges, you've got 3 systems trying to fix it: political, scientific, economical. The missing element should be guiding it. The knowledge in the Indigenous system should guide the whole process, because that's where the knowledge of the balance is. And when you start from spirit, you start from that we spoke about before. People talk about you can't measure. You can't measure spirit. But it's in the conversation with companies and organisations. They say, this is done in good spirit, or the spirit of the process is important. But it's very hard to measure. So I will be going in these little circles and be cryptic and not lineal in my presentation as well. And when it's just about 5 minutes to go, Oral will give me a sign and we'll wind it up and we'll finish on time. So I just want to give you a little challenge yourselves. If you had a value system that you want to start an organisation up today, a fresh organisation, it's a company, it's an organisation, it's a country, don't care what it is. What are your value systems? So I can have a couple just shout out. What are your values? What would you have? What's your 5 most important values? Honesty. Respect. We've got 2. Integrity. Reciprocity. 1 more. Compassion. Okay. We'll take those 5. What are those 5 challenges? What's the biggest challenge to respect? Don't say disrespect. Understanding. Understanding. Great one. What's the greatest challenge to honesty? Don't say dishonesty. Greed. We'll just go with those 2 because I only got 20 minutes. And we're in a university and we can lecture for 2 hours. Just take those 2. Where do they actually come from, those challenges? And how do they get ingrained into our conversation? What we've done for 2,000 plus generations is had a series of systems and coded systems that gave us wealth in knowledge, wealth in connections. No one was hungry. Everyone had a purpose, a place and a connect. Every plant and animal had a connect. So that system was honed over 2,000 generations. And because it was honed very slowly, trial and error, it was a strong foundation, a very strong foundation, but a fragile one. And it was all based on those 5 values: respect, honesty, integrity. All of those values were ingrained into this system over a number of generations. The challenges that came to this system, that'll come to an organisation, that'll come to a company, all of those challenges, the dishonesties, the disrespects and those other things, came on the boat. That's a proven, because colonisation was a return for investment. You tell me one colony where they set it up where there's no return for investment. Every colonisation was actually funded and supported. So there was a structure that sent them out. There was the church that started it off. The church system started the bureaucratic investment process that we have today, simply because they had return for investment. The church system divided the world into 2. And they thought they had the authority to divide the world into 2 because they controlled, in their mind, they controlled the world, and in their mind they had the power to control it and wanted to have that power. So they divided the world into 2. And the 2 were, anyone know what they were divided into? No, it wasn't. It's even smaller than us and them. Spanish and Portuguese. The world is divided, and you check this with the Pope back in the 1400s. I think his name is Alexander or something like that. But this is documented. When you document stuff, you put it into these things here, it becomes truth because it is written down. This becomes truth because it's down. If it's up here, it is mythology. Our systems are so sophisticated that they were here. We had this in our mind. We had genetics. We had the system of the 6 generations, the 2 by 4, the crossovers, not up and down, how the marriage system went. The wheel went into 6 generations here. The Burunga system, how we did our totems. Can I speak for all the trees? No, I can't. I can speak for a she oak. But if there's something happening over this place over there, there's a she oak, a banksia, and it's also got a Maori and a Jarrah, I'm going to have to talk to the she oak, Maori, Jarrah mob. We're going to have to sit together and say, collectively, we have to speak about this. No one person, no one family were the ultimate knowledge holders. Collectively, we had it. With the Western system come along, we want to talk to your boss. We want to talk to your president. We want to talk to your organiser. Hey, we're all collectively involved here. It's a different concept. So the knowledge system that we have ingrained up here is starting to be interpreted now for our own people first, internally. And those knowledge systems are the blueprints for successes. We use the 6 seasons quite a bit for planning now. Fertility, incubation, birth, childhood, adolescence, adult. Thinking about it. That gets up into your ideas when you're having the ideas of throwing around pre-feasibility, feasibility, business plan. Then enter into the market entry strategy, analysis of the market entry. It goes in 6. Once you've got a mature product, you want to reinvent it again. How do we reinvent this? Fertility. Let's think about how we do it again. The financial year, you finish your financial year, you do forward projection and planning, fertility. Go through the cycle. We've had it in our systems for many generations. But what we've been forced to do is to learn how to do it the whitefellow way. We want to come and teach you this education system so that you can fit in our society. Well, I'm sorry, your society is not the most balanced and best society that ever existed on this planet. Matter of fact, it was the worst. You come from chaos. You came from dysfunction. You came from a place, I'm talking about the colonisers, the unsettlers. They came off the boat from dysfunction, all the challenges you have in humanity because they've been challenged themselves. Landed in a place of thinking. This is the place of thinking and respect. And the two things they didn't do, they didn't think and they had no respect. So still jumping off the boat and thinking, look, these Aboriginal people have been functioning for 2,000 generations without a jail. Instead of thinking, let's talk to them to see how they function without a jail, they said, you silly blackfellas haven't got a jail. Well, we haven't got any criminals. Don't care, we'll take care of that. We'll build the jails. And we are the biggest occupants of them today. We didn't need them. We had no criminals. You haven't got any hospitals. We're not sick. We'll make you sick. We'll build the hospitals. The data's shown that now we're way up in those heavily proportioned of being represented in the kidneys, the hearts and other diseases. So what they've done is taken this ideal and saying, we've got a system that we're going to impose onto you to make you a better people. Hello? It's not even working for your people because there's more people in jail, there's more people in hospital, there's ambulance ramping, there's all. If your system's not working for you, why teach it to us and get us to turn it? So it takes 200 years to start to think, hang on, there's a knowledge system that existed here before that had a balanced functioning society. And what everyone wants is safety, a balanced functioning society. And now when we've got people that have got opportunities, and I'll pick on Oral McGuire because he's sitting here, but what they've done is taken the systems, put it into practice on the land and got outcomes. It works. So I challenge you to go to Oral's farm, check his systems out, check the farms around the neighbouring ones, check their systems out, see which one's got the balance. Which one will get the investments? So how much longer have I got now? Good to know the organisers. But the emphasis is on that process. I want to do a little experiment with you, just for 5 or 6 minutes. I want to get you to form just little talking circles wherever you are. You get around your talking circles. I want you to speak on this circle here. You're going to talk about the past, historians, what's exactly good about the past. The back section is going to talk about the present. What's good about the present? This section here is going to talk about the future. And you only got 2 minutes. That 2 minutes, I want to know what's up here. You're going to say, this is about the past. And you're going to get some person who's going to tell you why the past is important in that little circle. That back circle is going to talk about the present. What's important about the present? This over here is going to talk about the future. 2 minutes, nominate a spokesperson, and give me an answer in 2 minutes. One minute left. Okay, thank you. Stay where you are. Stay where you are. I'm going to have to cut you short. And it's an experiment. And you're all going to pass. That's what we do, you know. I want to change the subject now. So you've done that. You've covered the past, the present, the future. On this group here to tell us what's important about water. That group up there is going to tell us what's important about trees. This group here is going to tell us what's important about the sky. And this here is going to tell us what's important about people. 2 minutes, straight off the top of your head. One more minute. Okay, thank you. 2 minutes. It's done. Thanks for that. If we can go back to our seats. Thank you very much for your respect and participating. I don't want to know your answers. What I wanted to do is just in good faith, see what's at the top of your mind, what your conversation is straight away, and put yourself in the space of every Aboriginal person who's been asked the question. We've been asked questions like, tell us about your system, but I've only got 2 hours. That is 10 years worth of work. Tell us about how you do this, but I've only got 2 hours to sit here with you. That 2 minutes, you can touch on the surface, but it does nothing. Our culture is not 2 minutes. You equate that 2 minutes to 2 hours to 2 years to 2. It's the knowledge system that sat down for 3 months having this conversation. Not the 2 minutes, the 3 months that you'll get the relationship and get to understand. It takes investment into your own investment. That's where the spirit, we have those 4 sets of intelligence. In the Western world, you say mind, body, spirit. That 3 linked together. Well, there's an intellect as well that makes the mind goes into the 2. So your intellectual intelligence, your emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, they all link. So in that, so some emotional connect and intellectual connect. There's a whole theory and conversation on that, but they're all linked in there. So I just want to do the little experiment to show you that things can be done quickly. You can get a 2-minute conversation because things are already there. But in those 2 minutes, you've got those people who are expertise in those areas will dominate the conversation and bring out the conversation, which is fantastic. That's why it floats around. As soon as you change the subject, someone else steps up. So our leadership is like a flock of birds. It changes formation on the subjects that we're speaking about. So I'm not the expert in everything. I will need my nguns and my jooks and my conks. I need all my people to tell you my story or the connect. We can't do it alone. And we need a lot of time. So my emphasis and presentation in my small amount of time now is there is a knowledge system. It's applicable today. It's superior to a knowledge system that exists. And you need time to invest yourself into the relationships, take care of the relationships. I have time for another quick 2-minute story. Some of the biggest cosmetic companies in the world, and Oral prompted the conversation here. Everyone knows Clarins, Richet, Aveda. All use sandalwood. Part of their product, supply will. So we went to them and said, this is your resource, the sandalwood. So you need to invest into its guaranteed supply in the future to guarantee your products. We went to a congress and presented at a congress in France. And the first thing 2 of the officials said to me, well, you know, you're small players in this world. So how are you going to get to the bigger people? The first place we went to speak to was Aveda. Went to New York. The chairman of Aveda said, you've got 15 minutes. I was with a very astute salesman called Steve Birkbeck. Steve said to me, we've got to send sandalwood here. 15 minutes, I've got 10, you've got 5. So Steve had his speed presentation. He went through it beautifully. He nailed it in 10 minutes. You got 5. So with my 5 minutes, I looked at the fellow, Dominic Concierge, and I said to Dominic, I said, I can't talk to you in 5 minutes or 2 minutes. But if you had 20 minutes, I could show you how to throw a boomerang and catch a boomerang. And while we're doing that, I can talk to you about how our people respect this sandalwood tree. It's not just a resource, it's a part of our family and structure system. And if you had another 15 minutes, I'll talk to you about how, if you talk to Aboriginal people and your supply chain, they can guarantee that you'll have a supply. Because whenever they're taking pieces out, they're putting pieces back, and they're staying on country to look after. They're not having a contract to harvest out, and that's it. Once it's all harvested, they don't go back. They want to make sure it's part of, because it's part of Summon the Burunga. He cancelled all his appointments. We had him for 2 hours on the oval until he caught a boomerang. The sails were gone. Also, he flew out from New York to Wiluna. Once Clarence heard that he came out there, hang on, we want to come as well. So I went to Paris and spoke to the head of Clarence, Rocher, Yves Saint Laurent. All of these companies need product. And so we created what we called an indigenous brand, which is still applicable today. And then that brand then went out to the rest of the world, where they spoke to the people in Brazil on the same principle. Let's go and talk to the supplier to guarantee the supply. I just wanted to say that because culture is powerful. It's very powerful. And the dynamics of making that boomerang, the first forms of aerodynamics, fascinated an intellect who wanted to know how to boomerang fly, and he wanted to catch it. It got us 2 hours. So, I say the big spirit, our people are watching over us. I thank them for giving us our knowledge. Thanks, Oral, for the opportunity to present today. Mama Janangala, may the good spirit be with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Dr. Richard George is DPIRD's Senior Principal Research Scientist with 40 years' experience. He leads a water science group responsible for the coordination and delivery of land and water research, and leads major projects for irrigation, drought and hydrology. Richard has an international reputation in catchment hydrology, with experience across the state and in particular in the WA Wheatbelt and Belladong country. He is currently an adjunct professor at UWA in Murdoch and Deputy Chair of the Minister's Soil and Land Conservation Council. Today, Richard will be presenting on Belladong water systems.
We're all good. G'day, everyone. I'm the third Richard following the Rick and Richard show. And I'm going to take a bit of lead from both of them, and I'm going to change what I was about to do, and I'm going to just do a bit of talking, because I think a lot of what I had to say probably has relevance, but it's probably the next conversation, not this one. So if we just go to the first slide, and I'm just going to have a bit of a go at this verbally. So I drove 3.5 hours up this morning from Wilman-Wadandy country. And I was thinking on the way up about all the ways I could have this conversation, and one of them was I was going to get into this situation where I thought this is too technical. I'm going to have a go on the hoof. Agriculture is probably one of those stories that Richard just said, which is the newcomers trying to figure out how to farm in a landscape that they didn't understand and didn't know, and applied technologies to get to the system where we've got. So I think, agriculture sort of has a lot of credit to the systems that we've operated. But we cleared 17 million hectares to do it. There's 350 species out there that have gone from that landscape as a result of that. And we produce $10 billion worth of food, and we all like a chop and a bit of bread with our lunch. So it's a consequence. A lot of what I do in agriculture is walk that path between the production systems and the conservation systems, but in that agricultural environment. And a lot of what we're doing at the moment is trying to understand how we can be productive as an agricultural system, but do that in a way that's as sensitive and systematic as we can do in that 17 million hectare piece of landscape. So I guess I was going to talk a bit today about the wheat belt and water, and I wasn't going to be a smart academic, because I'm not, and I wasn't going to overrule the knowledge that Oral and others have given me some insight to. And I was going to try and provide a bit of an insight into what systems are changing out there and how we've changed those systems. And I think you understand the consequence that clearing 17 million hectares has resulted in 2 million hectares of that landscape becoming saline. And that's been one of the major reasons why we've seen water quality decline, and we've seen other factors introduced, climate change and landscape variability. I think what I've understood from some of the conversations I've had with Oral is there's two stories to tell here. One is to try and do what Rick said, which is to develop opportunities in that landscape to create Indigenous businesses and to create foods that are culturally significant and also appealing for a business sense. And we can talk about that and how you get water and how you create fresh water from saline water. And the desalination talk that sits in the back of this presentation, there are means now using solar power with $25,000 to create enough water to support a food business. The food businesses that I see on my daily work use Optus stadiums full of water per year to grow vegetables. They're not the agricultural systems that are going to work in Belladon country because there isn't that water there. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about taking a district swimming pool type scale of water and applying that to a few hectares to produce food, or we're talking about rearranging the soil and water dynamics using regenerative agriculture or using some form of rehydration to produce that water. So that's part of the story that I would have covered in a technical content, and I'm going to leave that for today. I think the other thing I heard about today is that walking in two worlds conversation is that there is an opportunity to work with the tenure holders of the wheat belt as it is in a 2025 model. When I started work, that was 12,500 businesses. That's now down to 4,000 businesses because they're congealing and growing and corporatising and expanding. And one of the things I pick up from those businesses is the interest in operating in a different mindset. And I think the awareness and the doors opening to participating in the conversation that you've just had and Richard just had this morning. And that's because many of them are aware of the consequences of 200 years of development, but there's also landscapes where traditional, in the sense of the last 30 years of agriculture, applies, and there's areas where it doesn't apply. And there's 2 to 3 million hectares of that landscape where the current form of agriculture doesn't apply in the business model as it sets today. And that's a place where agriculture would have a conversation around tenure and capacity to bring natural capital into those large corridors of the wheat belt valleys and the water systems of the wheat belt in Belladon country, where I think there's a real openness and a capacity to have that conversation. I also sit on the Soil and Land Conservation Council, which is a minister-appointed body, which is also thinking about that same story, about how you reconnect those large river systems of the wheat belt in a way that is sympathetic to agriculture and sympathetic to landscape history. And I want to finish with two stories, which is the background of this picture here. So I've had the pleasure of working in Northern Australia with the Miro and Gadgerong, the Garrajari and also Yaru around Broome. And in a project in 2010, 2020, we're up there for about 5 or 6 years. And that was a project of working about putting irrigated agriculture on pastoral leases in traditional owner country. So we did that through a process of around about 4 years of engagement, where we worked through with the lawmen, the station owners and the businesses and came up with trying to get a win-win-win proposition. And as a scientist, one of the things that my job was there to do was to work out how much water could be taken for the production of food. And some of these businesses, in fact, you're probably aware of Bidjidanga, one of the stations up there has now been taken over by the Bidjidanga group, and it was an ex-horticultural block for the production of food. And one of the beauties of that story was twofold. The first one was I went through the water stories with the lawman, and he talked to me about the 60,000 years of history of the flow of water from the recharge areas in the inland to where we were extracting water as industries. And we used our carbon age data sets, and we got a 40 to 60,000 year trace on the water from the source points where the cultural story began to where our science recreated that same sort of set of evidence. And I thought as a Western scientist, it was one place where I saw culture and Western science and modern science come up with the same story. And that to me was a realisation. The other one is the picture behind me. That picture behind me comes from mineral industry data sets, and it's a soils map. And so those snaking patterns through the landscape are these river systems. The bluey colours under the Darling Ranges are the laterites, and the pink country coming up through where Orrell is through the southern end of the Baldon country are the granites. And Orrell very quickly before presenting this talk told me about a cultural story about the beginning of water in the southern Avon, and pointed to a spot and said that was culturally significant. So I'm going to leave this conversation and say a couple of things. One is, I think Rick's language about walking together is real and realistic, and I think we can bring new tools in this sort of story in science and current knowledge into culture. And I also think for the 40 years that I've spent working and walking in the wheat belt, I've learnt patterns and systems that come from that story. And in the natural capital space, I guess all I'm saying today, as someone representing the business of agriculture, I think the door's open for conversations about food and water and landscape where it hasn't been before. And I just thank Richard for his conversation about complexity. And I'm happy to be a part of that conversation going forward. And I think that was part of the story today. So I've left my presentation on the PowerPoint. You're welcome to see it later, but I'd much prefer to have the conversation about combining science and culture and natural capital in the afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll start the next presentations. Neil Canby is Executive Director of Sunrise Energy Group, a renewable energy development company based in Perth, Western Australia. Sunrise Energy has a focus on working collaboratively with landowners and energy consumers by identifying pragmatic solutions and executing in a sensible and economically viable manner. Neil has over 25 years' experience in the energy sector in Western Australia. A recent example is securing development approval for a new big battery in an industrial precinct north of Bunbury. This promises to be Sunrise Energy Group's largest project to date. The 100 megawatt, 400 megawatt hour Wellesley battery, which I think is the location, yes, Wellesley battery, will sit in the strategic industrial area and connect to the Southwest Interconnected System, SWIS, via the nearby Western Power 132 kilovolt substation. Neil has a keen interest in research and innovation around agrivoltaics and has done a number of projects with UWA. Today he will be presenting using renewable energy to reclaim country and enable circular economy outcomes. Welcome, Neil.
Thanks, everyone. I am going to take you through a few PowerPoint slides, only because it's a bit easier than me talking to them, and I have made a terrible mistake, and I'm presenting stuff that I didn't research myself, so you can't ask many questions. So there'll be a very short question and answer at the end. So what I'm going to take you through, a very quick introduction to who we are. The stuff we started about 4 years ago, our small beginnings in the research space. Then the next wave of research we did with UWA. Talk about zero emissions agriculture, CRC opportunities, and then perhaps some more expansive thinking. So who we are, so Sunrise business I set up about 8 years ago. We're a renewable energy developer. We locate renewable generation where the power gets consumed. So that's my principle of trying to choose projects. Wherever we do that, we try and target unproductive land rather than take prime agricultural land away. And we've done some very novel first of things. So probably our first project down the corner here is Gingin, some lovely agricultural land. It's a sand mine behind us, which is now moving out of operations, and this will connect to the grid. So heavily sanded area that couldn't really be used for agriculture. We built our first 3 megawatt solar farm there. We've done a renewable microgrid down at the Peel Business Park, which would never have happened without something innovative located in the Peel Business Park, and we do a number of off-grid systems as well. So that's the sort of people we are. We're not some global renewable energy leader. We're very much a WA business looking at WA solutions. So I'm going to be talking about this site next, so our Boonenaring project. So back in 2021, I was approached by a friend of mine. Our kids were at school together at Subi Primary, and he said, I want to try and do something creative in your solar farm. I want to see if we can grow native plants underneath your solar panels. So we went through a process of coming up with an experiment which involves effectively planting 18 different species, 11 across 11 different positions across the solar panels. So you can see we were planting right in the middle of the solar panels. We were planting right in the gaps between the panels. What's relevant here is these panels actually rotate during the day. So they start off east, catching the sun in the morning, and then they rotate to the west. So in most instances, most places on that piece do get some shade during the day. So we planted them in a grid, and we just left them, see how they would do. So you can see about after the first summer, it was looking a bit sick and sorrowful. These were as I say, I'm an energy guy, not a plant guy, so I have no idea what those plants are, but they're obviously native species plants here. Some of them are getting quite successful survival rates through that first summer. If we move now to last year, June 2024, you can now see that these natives have spread quite substantially through the solar farm, with some of them spread as big as 10 metres. And what this does, and you can see the far side of the solar farm where we just have weed effectively, and what we have to come in and we have to effectively remove that weed. There's been a few solar farm fires of late, which have got a lot of attention. In fact, I think last week 5 solar farms in Victoria were shut down because of the weeds underneath the panels not being properly maintained. And here you can see if you actually just planted natives under those solar panels, you would remove the need to mow and clear all the vegetation from your solar farms. So we've had, from a very simple experiment, these have not had any irrigation. They've just been left in the ground themselves. We've had quite a significant survival rate and success with our trial. So that sort of spawned us thinking, well, how much bigger can we think about this? So we started a study with the engineering research, the environmental engineering team here in WA, the UWA. So we're assisting a copper mine seek to connect to the southwest system, which is going to be near Wongan Hills, very large copper mine. And it's an area which has been heavily saline impacted. So if you know Lake Neenan, it's now a completely saline lake, and the vast majority of land that was cleared for agriculture is no longer good for agriculture. So their task was to determine how we could find us a dual land use strategy for building. If we build a solar farm at the site, what can we do underneath the solar farm? And identify both economic and social benefits for the mine operator and the local community. So the Wongan Hills town site is about 10 kilometres northeast of here. And one of the key things was also address the land aggregation and environmental concerns with that piece of land. So finally, to enhance the overall land condition and biodiversity. So that was their challenge. There was a group of 12 or so of them, and they set to that over 2 terms. Obviously, the challenge they're trying to balance is the need for the renewable energy development versus the opportunity to turn the land into productive agricultural land for food production here in Australia. And they thought about, well, can we co-locate PV with agricultural forest? How do we improve, say, land conditions, and how does the power production and the community investor benefits come together? So what do they recommend? Their recommendation was actually to locate a native seed farm underneath the solar farm. So of all the things they looked at, they say if we were to grow native seeds under those panels, and then when they're old enough, relocate them to where the large amount of rehabilitation is going. From all the research they did, they looked at economic, more common products like carrots, etc. It came out to native seeds with the solar farm. And they, because of the heavily saline solution, they also worked through how they reduce the saline within the top 5 metres of soil. Partly benefited from a copper mine was going to reduce the water table. So they used this concept of flushing the topsoil every year for 5 years, and that just pushed the saline content back down. They also identified the most economic outcome for that farm as revenue from the native seeds and honey sales. So they were going to have bees around the solar farm and eucalyptus to protect it. They saw the opportunity, it would be a plant hotspot. It would be a tourist attraction. It would create local employment opportunity from both the solar farm construction operations, but also then managing that whole seed farm and honey extraction. And obviously, they assessed that after 5 years, the topsoil would be back to the condition we would expect for prior to us sort of impacting that land and it being impacted by the saline content of that land. So there's I think they've published a research paper, or certainly if you speak to Sally Thompson, I'm sure she'd be very happy to share more on how the team went through the process. I think what we were seeking to do, and I was, Sally asked me very clearly not to give my views too early into the process around what I thought was the right outcome. The outcome they came up with was not what I thought they would come up with. And so what I think this highlights, and there's been a couple of conversations about this today, is the power of creativity within people when they look to solve problems. So rather than us live within the constraints of the thinking that we have previously had, it's about giving people the opportunity to think differently. And they did. So we continue to help that copper mine progress through its approvals and connections, and we will continue to push this as an add-on to the copper mine, including the agrivoltaics underneath. What we're also doing, hopefully, and I think it's just going through the final sign-offs within the CRC process. So you may be aware there's a zero emissions agriculture CRC that was established start of July last year, running for 10 years, looking how to remove or reduce emissions in agriculture. Sunrise is a partner in that, and our role has been to really try and encourage and rethinking around how we can use solar farms as locations for agriculture. they will shortly be kicking off a more structured research project around how you can use solar farms for agrivoltaics in Australia, in particular in Western Australia. So there's a lot of research and, in fact, production work that's happened in Europe where you can see agrivoltaics working very well. They're obviously dealing in a situation where they have small land masses available for solar. And so if they lift the solar up and grow agriculture underneath, then those two complement. We have the opposite. We have so much land mass. You know, the point often of these solar farms is an economic one, and they don't often consider the alternate benefits of doing things together. However, I think our challenge, and again, probably what sparked me to get involved in agrivoltaics was conversations I had with Caitlin Moore, who, when you understand properly the impact of climate change within our agricultural systems here, in particular horticultural systems in WA, and the fact that we continue to take most of our good horticultural land and redevelop it for property, we're actually not going to have a lot of land available to grow food for West Australians in Western Australia. So there's almost a critical need to work out how we can use this space, because we're rapidly removing all the other growing spaces that we have. And this is where I'm keen through the CRC that obviously runs for 10 years to really start amping up the thinking that you can have with this. So Richard, the previous presenter, talked about pump water from bores, so you can use solar power at that location to pump water to use as irrigation. You can desalinate water now. That's rather than have to truck in potable water, take the water that's available on site and make it suitable for use in agriculture. You can use the electricity there to produce zero emissions fertilizers. So there's some fantastic technologies that sit really well and make fertilizer for use within that local community. And probably my most passionate thing is about the way you grow crops under these can be designed to grow for a community. So Sunrise has a passion to try and build fringe of grid renewable solutions, because our fringe of grid towns have terrible power supplies. Most of them have, you know, an equivalent diesel generator backup because they get such a poor supply. And if we actually start locating solar battery, wind, and perhaps some small diesel in the near future to support those systems in those towns, then you create a platform for, well, what else can we use that land for in that town from an agricultural perspective. And so we've been working on a project in Mullowa for a couple of years. Mullowa has a very low socioeconomic classification. One of the most expensive fresh food prices in WA, because, you know, the cost of getting food to Mullowa is pretty expensive. How do we take thinking around the solar farm and use that to actually grow food that can be consumed within the town? So they're some of the things we're trying to really drive. So we really drive into this circular economy thinking with some of this. More expansive thinking. So my challenge, I guess, I'd like to see my legacy. For me, every solar farm should have agriculture co-located with it. I don't see why we don't. And I almost would suggest, you know, society, we need to start demanding these sorts of things, that these projects, they exist in communities and they need to service communities, not just simply put all their power back on a big power line that goes somewhere else to be consumed. We should be strongly driving them towards engaging with the community. If nothing else, just grow natives underneath those solar panels and get rid of the weeds and get some of our natives back growing and get rid of the weed infestations. There's some other really interesting thinking. It might excite you, it might scare you, but one of the businesses looking to move into the Peel Business Park is a vertical farm. If you've ever seen how a vertical farm works, effectively we grow food in a warehouse using LED. and it's grown in boxes. And you sequence the crop so that instead of having an entire harvest of your field on one day, you can actually harvest it based on the growing cycle. So if carrots take 26 weeks, then you get 2 harvests, but you don't put all your carrots in on day 1 and harvest them all on 26 weeks. You grow them in boxes and you grow enough every couple of weeks to harvest, etc. There's plenty of thinking we've done about how do we grow in boxes underneath solar farms rather than necessarily the native soils as well. So that becomes easier to access, easier to harvest, easier to irrigate and those sorts of things. And whilst it might not be the right answer, it could be a completely dumb idea. What we're trying to do is help people rethink how we do agriculture when you're trying to grow it underneath solar farms. As I say, I do think there's a real need for us to think long term about where our food security is coming from in WA, and I think these solar farms go in and they'll be there for 30 years or more. So you can start planning a little bit longer term than a season or two's rotation of crop. And I think for me, the relationship here with rethinking what value natural capital has for us as a society is really critical as we move from thinking of sort of solar farms as just an economic income for some investor somewhere. So that's the research that we've done to date. That's the activities that are happening now with the CRC. They're the aspirations that I'm sort of working towards to try and push myself and more broadly an industry through this process. Happy to come back in a year or two and give you an update as to how we're progressing. And